Good evening, my friends. This is Paul, and tonight I'm going to be reviewing a very rare game for the DS called Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. Why is it rare, you ask? Well, because it came out in 2011, and I've been really intrigued with it ever since, but I haven't been able to track it down until just a few weeks ago when I was at Disc Replay and saw it for $12. And thankfully, I didn't actually have to pay those $12 because of a trade-in I made. So I was able to get that, Sonic Forces, and 2 amiibos for nothing. So, yay for trade-ins at Disc Replay. If you have one where you live, definitely take advantage of it. They even have, NES games piled up to nearly the ceiling. So, they've got pretty much something for everyone, even if you don't like video games. Anyway, enough talking about stores. Let's talk about the game. Now, most video games, when you play them, your objective is to get the hero to some kind of end goal, be it saving the princess in Mario, be it discovering who you are in other more story-driven games, making sure to solve a court case in the Ace Attorney games. Well, all those games have one thing in common, and that is your main character can't die and also can't lose. Well, Ghost Trick decides to completely flip that on its head, and you find out that your main character has already died, and you're possessing that character's spirit, who doesn't know how he died, or who he used to be, or, anything, besides what he looks like, by looking at his dead corpse. So, you're apparently a super thin man with a nice red snazzy suit, some spiky blonde hair that looks suspiciously like Bobby Fulbright's in Ace Attorney Duel Destinies. They were made by the same company, so go with it. And even some sunglasses, which is kind of like Bobby Fulbright. Yes, I am the very first person on the internet to have made that comparison. You can look it up if you don't believe me. So anyway, your character is informed by a talking desk lamp that you only have until dawn of the next day. Cool title for my next book, maybe. To find out who you are before you're ceasing to exist. And so, because you're a spirit, you obviously don't have a body. The only way you can move around the world is to move from inanimate object to inanimate object. So whenever you're in ghost mode, you can trace a line with the stylus to each object. You can also use the control pad or circle pad if you're playing on a 3DS, but I find it much more intuitive to use the stylus because technically the entire game can be played with the stylus, and it's actually much, much, much easier to do it that way. You can also do an action, or what they call a ghost trick, with certain objects that you possess. For example, you might find a refrigerator, and you can choose to open it. Or you might find a sword that's on a suit of armor's hand, and you can swing the sword. Stuff like that. They seem simple, but overall you have to sort of create a chain reaction of objects moving and people reacting to the movement of the objects to be able to get you where you need to go. You can also travel via telephone lines, but there has to be a living person who calls said place and another living person who answers the phone in order for you to use it. You can't just sneak into an unknown person's house. I mean, that would be overkill. The main hook of this game is your main character's ability to rewind time to 4 minutes before a person's death and then try to prevent the death in order to get forward in progressing your character's own notion of, who am I? So, as you can probably guess, there are a lot of people dying in this game. In fact, there are quite a few characters that die more than once, and you have to constantly alter their fate. Thankfully, like Ace Attorney, the characters provide lots of banter during these segments, and they do a fairly good job of telling you if you're on the right track or not, or if you've just gone way too far along the experimental road and you just need to start over. Thankfully, because it's only 4 minutes before the person's death, the checkpoints are, even by the narrative structure, extremely generous. Not too many games can say that. And you can easily just rewind time, or if you manage to avert someone's fate, like say you manage to save someone temporarily, That also serves as a checkpoint. So if you don't want to go all the way back to the 4-minute mark, you can go to the nearest fate averted moment. So yeah, the gameplay is pretty simple, but what really compels it to keep playing is the story and the visuals. First off, if I haven't mentioned this enough already, this is by the same creator of the Ace Attorney series and also the same company that produced them. So expect a lot of wacky, satirical, over-the-top humor. There's some straight man, funny man jokes in there. There's, the plucky, clueless female semi-protagonist. You got pretty much everything. And the situations are hardly what I would call realistic. In fact, a lot of times the game doesn't take itself very seriously, even in the very serious moments. Don't get me wrong, there are some emotional moments, and there are definitely some real amounts of terror that come, but for the most part, things are extremely lighthearted, from a man at a restaurant called the Chicken Kitchen that's obsessed with chicken and who sings in a rich tenor voice, to a detective that likes to dance his way through the crime scenes, to a pair of policemen where one likes to do a dance whenever he's panicking, to another that wishes he'd take his job more seriously, just to name a few. The animation is quite possibly the best I've ever seen on the DS, with a sort of cel-shaded look that manages to give the characters such detailed movements that it's kind of like you're watching a movie. And that's actually kind of the point, because for most of the escape sequences, you have to wait for one of the characters to do something which will give you an avenue to possess an object, and so on and so forth. It's the type of game where you really don't want to give away any details of the story whatsoever besides the bare minimum, because it's technically a visual novel / puzzle hybrid. So yes, there's a lot of reading, but thankfully, unlike most early Ace Attorney games, you can skip dialogue from the very beginning. There are some minor exceptions here and there if it's super important, but for the most part, if you have to rewind time and hear the same old thing over and over again, you can easily just hold the stylus to the touch screen and skip. I actually have very few complaints about this game. The story is quite possibly the best I've ever seen in a game apart from the Zero Escape games. The animation is solid. The music, while it can get repetitive, is perfect for the situation at hand, including some really intense pieces that, while they're still super MIDI-ified, they're amazing for the technology at the time. And the writing, if you can handle satirical and overblown writing, is actually really good. And during the serious moments, the translation team nailed it. The only major things I can gripe about in this title are the fact that when you're possessing objects, Sissel's range is extremely limited. Oh, did I just spoil that that's your character's name? My bad. Well, that's all you're getting out of me, because you gotta really figure this game out for yourself. Sissel's range is rather limited. You can pretty much only draw a line about as big as my pinky. And when you're in that ghost mode, you're limited to that perspective. So you have to exit ghost mode and then use the stylus or control pad to physically move around the environment to look and see what's going on elsewhere. I wish that there was an option that you could at least scroll the camera beyond Sissel's immediate point of view when you're in the ghost mode, but apart from that, I had relatively little problems with the interface, considering that there's hardly any of it. Yes, the game tries to remind you that time is passing a lot, but that's kind of the point. In fact, it even helps the plot advance at a few times, but I won't spoil that. Also seems to be a trend with DS games that sort of break the system's limits, it only has one save file. So if you want someone else to play it, you better be prepared to lose all your progress. Thankfully, because it's a very linear, story-driven title, it's not really as big of a deal as, say, The World Ends With You, where you have so many customization options. Very rarely do you get to experiment on your own. Just like in the Ace Attorney games, you get to take what the story gives you. And I can only think of maybe one or two instances where you had a choice, and that was, do you knock down this side of the painting or this side of the painting first? Either way, it's going to come crashing down. That's about as non-linear as you get. So if you like detective stories, if you like Ace Attorney's style, you will not be able to resist this game. If you don't like Ace Attorney or Zero Escape, but you do love games that are sort of like Rube Goldberg-esque in nature, as well as detective games in general, you are going to find a DS gem that's unlike anything else out there. Pick it up as soon as you can, although good luck trying to find it, because I had a heck of a time. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and until the next time, keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye.